Hello and welcome. This video was created to help people relax or sleep with this in mind, and I only put 3 ads in the entire video. The stories in this video are allegedly true and actually happened. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel and like the video. Lastly, thank you for being here when you have so many other choices now. Let's begin. Our story begins with a young woman named Elena. She's in her late 20s, with a love for adventure and a heart full of wanderlust. Elena is the kind of person who finds solace in nature, who believes the forest is a place of peace and renewal. She's been planning this solo camping trip for weeks, a chance to disconnect from the noise of the city and reconnect with herself. The forest she chose is called Blackwood Pines, a sprawling wilderness known for its towering trees, crystal-clear streams, and trails that seem to go on forever. It's the kind of place that feels untouched by time, where the air smells of pine and earth, and the only sounds are the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. Elena arrives at the campsite just as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. She sets up her tent quickly, her movements practiced and efficient. She's done this 100 times before, and there's a rhythm to it that feels almost meditative. Once her tent is secure, she gathers firewood, starts a small campfire, and settles in for the evening. The first few hours are peaceful. Elena cooks a simple meal over the fire, the crackling flames casting flickering shadows on the trees around her. She sips tea from her thermos, savoring the warmth as the temperature drops. The forest is quiet, but it's a comforting kind of quiet, the kind that makes you feel small in the best way possible. But as night falls, the atmosphere begins to shift. It starts with the sounds. At first, Elena doesn't think much of it. The forest is alive after all, and the creatures that call it home are just beginning their nightly routines. But there's something off. The usual chirping of crickets is absent, replaced by an eerie silence. The occasional hoot of an owl feels too loud, too close. And then there's the rustling. It's faint at first, just a whisper of movement in the underbrush. Elena tells herself it's probably a deer or a raccoon, but the rational part of her brain can't shake the feeling that whatever's out there is watching her. She tries to ignore it, focusing on the fire in front of her, but the rustling grows louder, more deliberate. It's not just in one spot anymore. It's all around her, circling the campsite. Her heart begins to race, her breath coming in shallow bursts. She grabs her flashlight and scans the trees, but the beam of light only seems to make the shadows deeper, more menacing. And then she hears it, a low, guttural growl so deep it vibrates in her chest. It's not an animal sound, at least not one she's ever heard before. It's something else, something primal and unnatural. The growl is followed by a series of clicks, like bones snapping together, and then laughter. Soft, mocking laughter that sends a chill down her spine. Elena's instincts scream at her to run, but she forces herself to stay calm. She's in the middle of the forest, miles from the nearest town. Running blindly into the darkness would only make things worse. Instead, she grabs her knife and sits close to the fire, her eyes darting around the campsite. The laughter fades, but the feeling of being watched doesn't. Hours pass, and the forest grows quiet again. Elena tells herself it was just her imagination, a trick of the mind amplified by the isolation. She crawls into her tent, zipping it shut behind her, and tries to sleep. But as she lies there in the darkness, she can't shake the feeling that something is still out there, waiting. And then she hears it, a faint whisper, so close it feels like it's coming from inside the tent. "You shouldn't have come here." Elena doesn't sleep that night. The whisper lingers in her mind, replaying over and over like a broken record. She clutches her knife tightly, her eyes fixed on the thin fabric of her tent. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of a branch makes her flinch. The forest feels alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy that seeps into her bones. When the first light of dawn finally breaks through the trees, Elena feels a small measure of relief. She unzips her tent and steps outside, her breath visible in the cold morning air. The campsite looks normal, peaceful even. but the memory of the previous night hangs over her like a dark cloud. She decides to explore the area, hoping to find some explanation for what she experienced. Maybe it was just a prank, she tells herself. Maybe some local kids were messing with her, but deep down she knows that's not the case. As she walks through the forest, she notices something strange. The trees here are different. Their trunks are twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The ground is littered with dead leaves and broken branches, but there's no sign of animal life. No birds, no squirrels, not even insects. It's as if the forest itself is holding its breath. And then she sees it. Carved into the bark of a massive oak tree is a symbol, a crude circle with jagged lines radiating outward like a twisted sun. The edges of the carving are blackened, as if burned into the wood. Elena reaches out to touch it, but pulls her hand back at the last second. The air around the symbol feels colder, heavier, and a faint hum vibrates in her ears. She takes a step back, her heart racing. What does it mean? Who carved it? And why does it feel so wrong? As she continues her exploration, she finds more symbols. Some carved into trees, others etched into rocks. They're all slightly different, but they share the same unsettling quality. The further she goes, the more frequent they become, until it feels like the entire forest is covered in them. And then she stumbles upon the clearing. It's small and circular, with a ring of stones arranged in a perfect circle. In the center is a pile of ash and charred wood, the remnants of an old fire. Scattered around the clearing are objects, bones, feathers, and strange trinkets that look like they've been there for years. Elena's stomach churns as she realizes what she's looking at. This isn't just a campsite. It's a ritual site. Her mind races with questions. Who performed these rituals? What were they trying to summon or banish? And why does the air here feel so thick, so oppressive? She's about to leave when something catches her eye. Half buried in the ash is a small, leather-bound journal. She picks it up, brushing off the soot, and flips through the pages. The handwriting is shaky and frantic, the ink faded with age. The first entry reads, "We thought it was just a legend. We were wrong. It's real, and it's hungry. If you find this, leave now. Don't look back. Don't let it find you." Elena's hands tremble as she reads the words. She flips to the next page, but the rest of the journal is blank, except for the final entry, scrawled in bold, desperate letters, "It's coming." Before she can process what she's read, a sound breaks the silence. A low, guttural growl, just like the one she heard the night before. It's closer this time, much closer. Elena's instincts kick in. She shoves the journal into her backpack and starts running, her feet pounding against the forest floor. The growl follows her, growing louder and more intense until it feels like it's right behind her. She doesn't stop until she reaches her campsite. She collapses next to the fire pit, gasping for breath, her mind racing. What is out there? And why is it after her? As she catches her breath, she notices something strange. The fire pit is cold, the ashes undisturbed, but she could have sworn she left the fire burning when she went to explore, and then she sees it. Scratched into the dirt next to the fire pit are 3 words. "You're not alone." Elena sits by the cold fire pit, her mind racing. The words scratched into the dirt, "You're not alone," echo in her thoughts. She feels exposed, vulnerable, as if unseen eyes are watching her from every direction. The journal she found weighs heavily in her backpack, its cryptic warnings gnawing at her sanity. She knows she can't stay here. The campsite no longer feels safe, but neither does the idea of venturing deeper into the forest. Her options are limited. Stay and risk whatever is out there finding her, or leave and risk getting lost in the endless maze of trees. In the end, she decides to stay, at least for now. She needs answers, and the journal might hold the key. She pulls it out of her backpack and flips through the pages again, hoping she missed something the first time. The entries are sparse, but each one is more chilling than the last. "It's been 3 days since we arrived. The symbols were here when we came, but we didn't think much of them. We should have listened to the stories. Last night we heard the laughter. It sounded human at first, but then it changed. It wasn't human anymore. We tried to leave this morning, but the forest wouldn't let us. The trails looped back on themselves no matter which way we went. It's playing with us. It's getting closer. We can feel it watching us even in the daylight. It's not just in the trees, it's in our heads. Elena's hands tremble as she reads the final entry again. It's coming. She doesn't know who wrote the journal or what happened to them, but one thing is clear. They never made it out of the forest. As the day wears on, Elena tries to distract herself by gathering supplies and reinforcing her campsite. She builds a larger fire, hoping the light will keep whatever is out there at bay. But as the sun begins to set, the forest grows restless. The rustling returns louder and more aggressive than before. The growls and clicks are back too, accompanied by that same mocking laughter. Elena clutches her knife, her eyes darting around the campsite. She feels like a cornered animal waiting for the predator to strike, and then she sees it. At first, it's just a shadow, a dark, shapeless mass moving between the trees. But as it steps into the firelight, Elena's breath catches in her throat. It's tall, too tall to be human, with long, spindly limbs that seem to bend in unnatural ways. Its skin is black and slick, like oil, and its face is a nightmare. Hollow eyes, a gaping mouth filled with jagged teeth, and a twisted grin that stretches too wide. It doesn't move like a living thing. It glides, its movements fluid and deliberate, as if it's savoring her fear. Elena's instincts scream at her to run, but her legs won't obey. She's frozen, paralyzed by the sheer horror of what she's seeing. The creature tilts its head, studying her with those hollow eyes. And then it speaks. Its voice is a cacophony of sounds, growls, clicks, and whispers, all blending together into something almost human. "You shouldn't have come here," it says, echoing the whisper from the night before. Elena's mind races. She needs to do something, anything, to escape. But the creature is between her and the only path out of the campsite. And then she remembers the journal. The entries mentioned symbols that seem to ward off the creature, at least for a while. She looks around frantically, searching for something she can use. Her eyes land on a sharp rock near the fire pit. Without thinking, she grabs the rock and begins carving one of the symbols into the dirt. Her hands shake, but she forces herself to focus. The creature watches her, its grin widening as if amused by her efforts. When the symbol is complete, Elena steps back, her heart pounding. For a moment, nothing happens. And then the creature lets out a deafening screech, its body contorting in pain. It stumbles back, its form flickering like a dying flame before vanishing into the shadows. Elena collapses to the ground, gasping for breath. It worked, but for how long? Elena doesn't sleep that night. The encounter with the creature has left her shaken, but it's also given her a sliver of hope. The symbols work, at least for now. She spends the rest of the night carving them into the ground around her campsite, her hands trembling as she works. By the time the sun rises, the area is covered in jagged lines and twisted circles, forming a makeshift barrier against the darkness. But she knows it's only a temporary solution. The creature is still out there, and it's only a matter of time before it finds a way to break through. As the morning light filters through the trees, Elena makes a decision. She can't stay here, waiting for the creature to return. She needs to find a way out of the forest, or if there is no way out, she needs to confront the source of the horror. She packs her bag with the essentials, the journal, her knife, a flashlight, and a small supply of food and water. Before she leaves, she takes one last look at the symbols she's carved. They've kept her safe so far, but she can't rely on them forever. The forest is eerily quiet as she sets out, the usual sounds of birds and insects replaced by an oppressive silence. The trees seem to close in around her, their twisted branches forming a canopy so thick it blocks out most of the sunlight. The air is heavy with the scent of decay, and the ground beneath her feet is soft and spongy, as if the earth itself is rotting. As she walks, she notices more symbols carved into the trees and rocks. Some are familiar, like the ones she's been using, but others are more complex, their lines intersecting in ways that make her head ache just to look at them. She wonders who carved them and whether they survived. After hours of walking, she comes across something that stops her in her tracks. It's a cabin, or what's left of one. The structure is old and crumbling, its wooden walls warped and blackened with age. The roof has partially collapsed and the windows are shattered, their jagged edges like broken teeth. But what catches Elena's attention is the door. It's covered in symbols, dozens of them carved deep into the wood. Some are the same as the ones she's seen before, but others are completely unfamiliar. The air around the cabin feels colder, heavier, and there's a faint hum that makes her teeth ache. Elena hesitates. The cabin is clearly a place of power, but it's also a place of danger. She can feel it in the air, in the way the shadows seem to shift and writhe around her. But she knows she can't turn back now. She steps inside. The interior is dark and damp, the floor covered in a thick layer of dust and debris. The walls are lined with shelves, each one filled with strange objects, bones, murky liquid and trinkets that look like they've been there for centuries. In the center of the room is a table, its surface covered in more symbols and what looks like dried blood, and then she sees it. On the far wall, partially hidden by a tattered curtain, is a large, ornate mirror. Its frame is carved with intricate patterns, but the glass is cracked and fogged with age. As Elena approaches, she notices something strange. The reflection in the mirror isn't hers, it's the creature. Its hollow eyes stare back at her, its twisted grin widening as it raises a clawed hand and presses it against the glass. The surface ripples like water, and Elena realizes with a sinking feeling that the mirror isn't just a reflection, it's a portal. Before she can react, the creature steps through. Elena's breath comes in shallow gasps as the creature steps fully into the cabin. Its hollow eyes lock onto hers, and its twisted grin stretches wider, revealing rows of jagged teeth. The air grows colder, the faint hum in the room intensifying until it feels like her skull might split open. But Elena doesn't freeze this time. She can't. Her survival depends on what she does next. She glances at the symbols carved into the walls. They're glowing brighter now, their light pulsing in time with the creature's movements. She doesn't fully understand their power, but she knows they're connected to the creature and to the forest itself. The creature takes a step forward, its clawed hand reaching for her. Elena ducks behind the table, her mind racing. She needs a plan, something to turn the tide. Her eyes land on the journal in her bag, and an idea begins to form. The journal mentioned rituals that the previous campers tried to use to banish the creature. Maybe, just maybe, she can use them too. She grabs the journal and flips through the pages, her hands trembling. The entries are fragmented, but one passage stands out. The symbols are the key. They bind it, but they also weaken it. If you can complete the circle, you can trap it. But beware, it will fight back. Elena's eyes dart around the room. The symbols on the walls form a partial circle, but there are gaps, places where the carvings have faded or been damaged over time. If she can complete the circle, she might be able to trap the creature, but there's no time to carve new symbols. She needs another way. Her eyes land on the jars of murky liquid on the shelves. She doesn't know what's inside them, but they're her only hope. She grabs one and smashes it against the floor, using the shards of glass to cut her palm. Blood wells up, and she uses it to draw the missing symbols on the walls, her movements frantic but precise. The creature lets out a deafening screech, its form flickering as the symbols glow brighter. It lunges at her, its claws slashing through the air, but Elena ducks and rolls out of the way. She can feel its rage, its desperation, as it realizes what she's doing. She finishes the final symbol just as the creature reaches her. Its claws graze her arm, drawing blood, but she doesn't stop. She presses her hand against the wall, completing the circle. For a moment, nothing happens. And then the room erupts in light. The symbols blaze with a blinding radiance, their light converging on the creature. It lets out an ear-splitting scream, its form twisting and contorting as the light consumes it. The air fills with the sound of cracking glass, and the mirror shatters into 1,000 pieces. When the light fades, the creature is gone. Elena collapses to the floor, her body trembling with exhaustion. The cabin is silent. The oppressive energy lifted. She did it. She trapped the creature, or destroyed it. She isn't sure which. But as she looks around the room, she notices something she hadn't seen before. Beneath the table, partially hidden by debris, is a small, weathered photograph. She picks it up, her breath catching in her throat. It's a picture of a group of campers, their faces smiling and carefree. In the background, she recognizes the clearing with the stone circle, the ritual site she found earlier. But what chills her to the bone is the figure standing at the edge of the photo, barely visible in the shadows. It's the creature. The journal's final entry flashes in her mind. It's coming. The campers in the photo never made it out of the forest. They became part of its curse, their souls trapped alongside the creature. But Elena has broken the cycle. She's survived. And so, dear listener, Elena's story comes to an end. She faced the darkness and emerged stronger, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. But the forest still stands, its secrets waiting for the next curious soul to uncover. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales of mystery and horror. Until next time, stay curious. But remember, some secrets are better left buried.